Hello and welcome to The Dailyaus. I'm Lucy Tassell.
I'm Emma Gillespie.
For as long as the Oscars have existed, people have campaigned to win them. Back in 1929, when Mary Pickford was nominated for Best Actress at the second ever Oscars, she invited the voting committee, then just 5 people, over to her house for tea, and she won. In today's episode, we'll unpack the history of Oscar campaigning and explain why frontrunner Timothee Chalamet has been making headlines.
Lucy, what a brilliant time of the year. So excited to be chatting to you about Hollywood's Night of Nights. The Oscars are nearly upon us, Monday morning, Australian time. But this word campaign, we're seeing it thrown around a lot, talking about these awards, but it's typically a word associated with politics.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about campaigning specifically in the context of an awards ceremony, what does it actually involve?
Yeah, I mean, it is very much like campaigning for a political position. It's sort of like running to be the mayor of a small city council in terms of the number of people you have to convince that you were the best actor in a leading role, you created the best makeup and hair design for a film, you had the best film of the year.
Well, if my education from Parks and Rec is anything to go by, securing a seat in local government is no small feat.
It isn't. And this is also as if a local government race was being watched by hundreds of millions of people, and a really tiny one. I'm not talking about like how we covered Zoran Mamdani winning the mayorship of New York City a couple of months ago. That's, I mean, obviously a very big city. This is basically you're trying to convince the more than 10,000 members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
Also known as the Academy.
Exactly, as in Academy Awards, although we call them the Oscars. No one knows why we call them the Oscars, but we do.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
truly.
there you go.
The reason is lost to history. There are, as I said, more than 10,000 people in this academy. They're across every area of the industry. Sound techs, lighting techs, makeup and hair, as I said, producers, actors, directors, editors, everyone. These members look at the films of the previous year and across their little dedicated branches within the academy, they vote for 5 nominees in major awards categories.
Okay, so just to recap, the Oscars nominees are determined by this membership base of over 10,000 industry professionals. They're all experts in their relevant niches. They get to vote for, let's say you're a cinematographer, you get to vote for your picks of the best in cinematography for the year, and that ends up being what we see as the nominees.
That's right, the nominees. But then once you have those nominees, you have to convince, if you are one of those nominees, you have to convince the entire voting body to vote for you.
Right.
So once the nominee is locked in, then everyone gets to vote on everything. So imagine I'm an actor. I can vote on best makeup. I can vote on best production design.
Okay, and
I
vice
can
versa.
vote on best actor.
So, Lucy, explain to me how the cast and crew of films that are in Oscars contention, and once the nominees are locked in, how they spend their time between releasing the film, promoting it, getting nominated, and rolling onto the red carpet for the actual Oscars. How do they spend their time hustling to win that iconic gold statuette?
Yeah, so it all really starts, I mean, it can start before this, but it really starts with the first time that the film is screened. So that could be at a premiere event, that could be at a film festival, that could be a full year before the ceremony. So I think a really good illustrative example is the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I'll just call Everything Everywhere because that's too long to say over and over again. That film came out in early March 2022. It premiered at the South by Southwest Festival. It was eligible for the Oscars the following year in March 2023. And if we take one of the actors from that film, Ke Huy Quan, who was a former child actor who came out of semi-retirement for the film, his journey was attending every possible event that you can think of, even tangentially related to the film. Special screenings, big premieres all around the world, interviews, award ceremonies, just trying to convince his colleagues, his acting colleagues and his industry colleagues, I should be the recipient of a major award for this role.
Is that why, Lucy, we don't often get a chance to see most Oscar picks until a few months out from the ceremony itself? Is there this kind of school of thought that the later in the year you release a film, the more people are likely to remember it?
It depends. It's influenced by a bunch of different factors. It is rare, I would say, for a film to come out that early and to take a whole year of campaigning before you actually get to the Oscars. And for Ke Huy Quan, it did work. He was nominated for 93 awards across the course of the year, a lot of those from local critics associations. Yep. And as he kept accepting these awards and giving speeches, more and more kind of steam built under him as like, we're going to give this guy this award for this performance.
Got it.
But it's pretty rare. Another kind of good example is back in the early 90s, The Silence of the Lambs, that movie that won multiple Oscars. That came out in February of the year before it was eligible.
Wow.
So it took a full year, but then by the time the Oscars rolled around, it got multiple big awards.
So there can be critically acclaimed releases much earlier in the year, not just in that kind of typical hyped up awards season that we see in cinemas.
But it sort of works as like, so in May you've got the Cannes Film Festival, which is when a lot of movies will come out, but then they'll premiere at the festival, but then they won't actually play in theaters worldwide for several months. Then you've got what Americans call the fall festivals. So that's in their autumn, September, October. You have a bunch of different film festivals, Toronto, Venice, Telluride are the big three. And then, so a film will come out there. It will get a bunch of reactions from critics out of the festival, and then it'll go pretty quickly into theaters. And that is when a sort of quote unquote campaign will begin. So actors giving interviews, attending these events, again, as I said, trying to convince their colleagues, I gave the best performance, I designed the most beautiful set, I edited the most well-edited, not editing myself, edited the most well-edited film of the year, as they try and get to the Oscars the following year.
So those massive campaigns and press runs are not maybe as much about the audience, not much about us as we might think, and they're a lot more about the 10,000 industry peers who they're hoping to win over.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lucy, I know you mentioned some pretty historic examples of campaigning, including even an infamous cup of tea that won over the grand total of 5 Academy members of the day. That's a long way from spending an entire year working to promote your film in the hopes of getting nominated. So where did the modern Oscar campaign come from?
It really starts with Harvey Weinstein, the convicted sex offender. So one of the reasons he was able to be so prolific and why so many of his victim survivors were in the industry is because he was an incredibly powerful film producer. Yeah. So he has been thanked so many times at the Oscars. There are YouTube compilations of people saying, and thank you, Harvey Weinstein, thank you, Harvey Weinstein.
I've seen them.
So his production company, Miramax, and then his other company, the Weinstein Company, they would either produce films or they would pick up films after they had been made to distribute them. And he would run a campaign, like a political campaign, to win an Oscar. He often worked with a publicist called Scott Rudin, who similarly does not have sexual allegations against him, but it was alleged in an article in The Hollywood Reporter that he once smashed a Mac desktop monitor onto an assistant's hand. And in a 2025 New York Times interview, Rudin, admitted to yelling and throwing things at assistants in the past in the heat of an Oscar campaign. So the zenith of Harvey Weinstein's power, so he has worked with Scott Rudin, but he also worked by himself. He worked with his brother.
Yep.
The zenith of his power was the year that Shakespeare in Love swept the Oscars. It beat Spielberg's film Saving Private Ryan to Best Picture. And Harvey Weinstein's work secured a supporting actress win for Judi Dench, despite her having less than 10 minutes of screen time. Some estimates peg it at about 6 minutes if you're sitting there watching it with a stopwatch.
Yeah. Anyone that watched Shakespeare in Love during high school, as I had to for English, will be surprised to hear that Judi Dench won an award for that performance and may not even remember, indeed, that she was in the film.
So that was the 1999 Oscars, the ceremony in 1999, reflecting on the films of 1998.
Yep.
And actually, just fun fact, or maybe just sort of a side note, Judi Dench has been nominated 8 times. Obviously, she's an amazing actor, nominated for 8 Oscars. 7 of those 8 nominations were in films produced by either Harvey Weinstein or his company or Scott Rudin.
Okay, and that says a lot more about the industry and Weinstein's influence in Hollywood than it does about Judi Dench's specific choices as an actor.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey guys, this is my friend Rosa. Say hi, Rosa.
Hi, Rosa.
She's cooking up the deep dive video that you're watching right now. Rosa, what do you want them to do?
Subscribe.
You heard the woman. Now back to the video.
For Shakespeare in Love, Harvey Weinstein launched a campaign that was like unprecedented in scope, and many, many journalists have written about it. I believe there's actually a book that's been written about this specific Oscars campaign. One publicist told Vanity Fair a couple of years ago, quote, "It all began with Harvey. I don't remember ever feeling pressure like that from other studios. He was like, can you do these radio call-ins all morning?" So I think what they're saying there is like calling into radio stations saying, gee, I've just seen this amazing movie called Shakespeare in Love. Has anyone else seen it?
Yep.
And in that same Vanity Fair article, Mark Gill, who was president of Weinstein's company Miramax at the time, said, quote, "This was not saying to the stars, okay, you can go on a couple of talk shows to open the movie and do a weekend of interviews and thanks so much for helping. That was just, good morning, you've got 3 more months of shaking hands and kissing babies in you."
Okay, so these were months-long campaigns which were ultimately pretty grueling for the cast and crew involved.
Yeah, stretching from, as I said, that fall festival season. It's also, I would say, very typical in America to release movies in the last week of November for the Thanksgiving weekend when people are home with their families, need to get out of the house, go to the movies. Similarly, on the Christmas weekend.
Yeah, but clearly, Lucy, it worked.
Yeah.
And that has essentially inspired the campaigning that we now see year in, year out.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the things that we know Weinstein did, and I'm sourcing a lot of this from an oral history in The Hollywood Reporter, he threw a party for the film's director that he invited Academy members to, and there was some kind of scandal around that because it was sort of thought, is this actually within the spirit of what you can do to win an Oscar?
Okay, pushing that kind of lobbying idea.
Yeah, he lobbied people. He sent out VHS tapes so people could watch the film at home. This was, I don't know that he was the first to do it, but this was a fairly new idea. Now it's actually so baked into the voting process that there's, I believe, reportedly, like a streaming platform specifically for members of the Academy to be able to watch films.
So they have fair access to all of the potential nominees.
Yeah. He called people up to confirm they got the VHSs that he had sent. He held a screening at a retirement home where Academy members lived, so like old Hollywood stars who are still voting members of the Academy.
No demographic going unchecked.
Yes, and allegedly started a whisper campaign, this is how it's described in the article, where publicists were sort of spreading the word, telling voters the only good part of Saving Private Ryan is the first 15 to 20 minutes, the sort of famous opening sequence, and saying like, after that it's just a regular movie, vote for Shakespeare in Love instead, it's doing something interesting.
Wow, it really is so political. So political. So political to have a smear campaign against a Spielberg film that was your biggest competitor in that year.
And Spielberg himself said at the time, and this is from that oral history, he told his publicist, don't go down to Harvey's level. I don't want to engage in that kind of sort of getting in the muck.
Yeah.
But he didn't win in the end.
Wow. So that was 1999. A lot has changed in the world of cinema, film, Hollywood. What do we know about this year's Oscar campaign? Are things done the same way?
As far as I know, there's a bit less of the whisper campaign element, but certainly in terms of everything that the Weinstein Company was doing, people are still doing, sending out, they're called screeners, so it wouldn't be a VHS tape anymore. It would be a link to a website most of the time or a DVD, hosting parties, hosting premieres, having Q&As with the actors involved. Similarly to the Everything Everywhere example, there's one film that's been on the trail for almost a year, and that's Ryan Coogler's vampire thriller Sinners, which premiered back in April 2025.
Yep. Really the dark horse, I think, of this awards season, but has dominated, swept the floor, a record 16 nominations at the upcoming ceremony on Monday.
Yeah. And it has been joined like along that long campaign trail. There are other kind of front runners. You got K-pop Demon Hunters, came out in June. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another came out in September. Marty Supreme and Hamnet came out in December in the US. They came out a bit later here in Australia.
Yep.
Those are sort of front runners for various awards. And there are a lot of interesting Oscar races this year, but one in particular has been making headlines, and that is Michael B. Jordan in Sinners, as you said, picking up a lot of nominations.
Yep.
And Marty Supreme's Timothee Chalamet, who are going head-to-head for Best Actor.
Yeah, it felt like just a few weeks ago, Timothee Chalamet was locked in as the front runner, as the favourite for Best Actor. He has cleaned up, if I can say that, at the preceding award ceremonies. And then we had the ACTRA Awards just the other day, formerly known as the SAGs.
Yeah.
And Michael B. Jordan kind of took an upset win there for Best Actor, and that's thrown the race on its head, I guess, and now it seems like Jordan might edge ahead.
He might indeed. There's lots of awards you can win in the lead up to the Oscars that can be considered kind of precursors or predictors. You've got the Golden Globes, you've got the BAFTAs, you've got the ACTRA Awards. So the Golden Globes, for example, that voting body doesn't cross over with the Oscars voting body.
Okay.
But you can win a Golden Globe and give a really good speech, and that might make people think, yeah, actually, that was a really good performance, and I worked with you before and I liked you. Let me put you number one.
Wow, amazing that an acceptance speech can be part of the campaign.
Yeah, 100% it is. I mean, I was saying like Kiwi Kwan, he was accepting all these awards. He really built a narrative over the course of the year.
Yeah, I remember that with Kieran Culkin last year, who is so endearing in acceptance speeches. He's so chaotic and sweet. I think he really won people over in those rooms, in those very important rooms of Academy members.
Yeah.
That, you know, he was the man for the award.
Yeah. And so with Michael B. Jordan winning that ACTR award, actors are the biggest branch of the Academy's many branches. But you can win that award and not go on to win the equivalent Oscar. So back in 2019, Olivia Colman won the Oscar for The Favourite, but Glenn Close had won the then SAG award for The Wife. So once you open it up to the whole voting body, things can shift and change. People can even change their minds.
So Michael B. Jordan is not a sure thing.
He's not a sure thing. But I will say his win has been seen as a big forecast for the Oscar, and it came a few days before Chalamet made some headlines, and that was because of his comments on opera and the ballet.
Frankenstein, which was like a hugely popular movie this year, I didn't think that pacing was extraordinarily fast or anything, but it pulled people in, you know? But it does take you having to wave a flag of, hey, this is a serious movie or something. And some people want to be entertained and quickly. I'm really right in the middle, Matthew, because I admire people, and I've done it myself, to go on a talk show and go, hey, we got to keep movie theaters alive. You know, we got to keep this genre alive. And another part of me feels like if people want to see it, like Barbie, like Oppenheimer, they're going to go see it and go out of their way to be loud and proud about it. And I don't want to be working in ballet or opera or, you know, things where it's like, hey, keep this thing alive, even though no one cares about this anymore.
Okay, there has been a lot of negative PR attention on Timothee Chalamet for those comments, Lucy. But do they actually matter to his Oscars hopes? When did voting close?
Yeah, so that interview with Matthew McConaughey had been released on YouTube about 2 weeks earlier, but it hadn't really picked up a lot of steam. It was when that isolated clip that we played was shared on X that it went viral. But when that clip was shared, I did a quick bit of maths. It was 10:23 a.m. on the 6th of March, Australian time. In LA time, that was 3:23 p.m. on the 5th of March, and that was 90 minutes before Oscar voting closed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So this could have impacted his chances by 90 minutes.
Possibly. I'm talking about if voters had seen the clip in the first 90 minutes that it had been posted.
Right. Okay. So for that clip to really have impacted Timothee Chalamet's chances, the voting body needed to have not yet voted.
Yeah.
So they needed to be kind of running behind on their submissions.
Yeah.
Plus they needed to have seen that the moment it went viral, pretty much.
The moment it was posted, full stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there are other reasons why the tide had kind of turned towards Michael B. Jordan, and his win at the ACTRA Awards is a big one.
Yeah, with the ACTRA Awards win coming at the start of the last week of Oscar voting. So anything could happen. I mean, that's the thrilling thing about the Oscars. Anything can happen. And the other thing is once the votes have been submitted, that's it. You can't change the result. I mean, think back a couple of years, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on stage mid-ceremony. 25 minutes later, he was standing up there holding his Oscar.
Yeah, what a wild time that was for the world of pop culture.
Yeah.
Lucy, thank you so much for explaining all of that to us. It's so fascinating. And if you're as keen as we are to watch the ceremony, you can check it out on 7 and 7 Plus Monday morning, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 10 a.m.
That's right.
The red carpet action kicks off at 9:30 a.m, although I'm sure on your commute into work, there'll be plenty of exciting and delicious red carpet pictures for us to look at. So exciting. And 4 Aussies in contention too, we should mention.
Yeah.
Rose Byrne, Jacob Elordi, Nick Cave.
Fiona Crombie, production designer on Hamnet.
Very exciting. We'll be updating you over on the TDA feed throughout the day if those Aussies are successful. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We'll be back with the headlines later on. Until then, have a good day.
Bye.